Soundies, welcome to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 25th of February, 2024. It's good to have you here. Hope you're all doing well. Let's jump on over to our agenda, and we've got a lot to cover today. Just a couple of quick notes regarding this. So this is a workshop that goes along with our courses over at school.learnlightandsound.com. We have had a little bit of a problem with our service provider over the last couple days. So for those of you that are signed up at the school and have bought some of the courses, I apologize for any access issues you've had. In the short term, until we get this resolved, Danny is going to go ahead and put a URL in the chat. You can go to this other URL. It is basically learn-light-and-sound.teachable.com. And if you go there, you can access all of your courses. So in the meantime, until we get it fixed, and then you'll go back, once we get it fixed, to the regular school.learnlightandsound.com. So apologies for the trouble there. Okay. Learn-light-and-sound.teachable.com. That's correct. Okay, here it comes into the chat. There it is.
Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, so that should work. We also have some more live streams coming later today, not on this channel, but after today. I will be a guest on a couple of other live streams, one from our friend Matt Ruff, who is going to be starting his live stream called The Senior Tech. I put a link down for that down below. If you want to learn from somebody who has been mixing live sound and broadcasts, including things like the Daytona 500, for longer than some of us have been alive, then that would be a good live stream to check out. So there's that one. And then secondly, JJSC Tech is also invited me to come on. I have a link for that one down below. That's at 5 p.m. Eastern time. And we're going to talk about lighting and sound on that one. So if you're interested, links are down in the description. All right. We're going to go ahead and in just a moment here jump into our Q&A, and then we're going to go take a look at Fairlight, specifically Fairlight 18.6. 0.5, which was actually just a recent update. And I'm going to talk about, kind of show you two different mixes I've been working on, and just give you some ideas of kind of the different workflows that may work depending on the type of piece that you're working on. So let's go to the question and answer. And the first question is, do you have a particular workflow for Fairlight? From Frank. And the answer is, Frank, it depends on the project. So we're going to talk about that in just a few moments here. And I think that'll give you some insights there. Secondly, Timothy asks, are you planning on covering the, quote, normalize for YouTube, close quote, option under publishing? It seems to me it's in an odd place. That's an odd place to put that option, and I'm not convinced it is helpful. We'll actually take a look at that and see how that works, Timothy. It's a great question. That's actually a relatively new feature, by the way. And then Dewey has a question completely unrelated to Fairlight, but thanks for submitting this ahead of time, Dewey. I've only used my MixPre 3 as a field recorder and or audio interface. I'm thinking of using it as a mixer for a small event with DJ, handheld wireless mic, and play out from vMix. Thoughts? Dewey, I think that can be great. I would just do all your testing ahead of time. Actually set all of that up and test and make sure that it all works in the way that you expect. Routing can be a little bit tricky if you're going to be, I don't know if you're using vMix as an input or only as an output, but it sounds like you're going to use it as an input because you're playing out from vMix. So I would just set it all up and make sure it works okay. And then if you have a specific question, go ahead and send me a note. Happy to take a look at that and see what I can do to help. But yeah, it's a small, MixPre 3 is really small. And so it's not as easy as using linear faders, the big sliders. But yeah, I think it can do the job. Sound quality-wise, you certainly won't be sacrificing anything, and you'll be taking an unbalanced output from that MixPre 3 into your PA system, so just keep that in mind. So if you work all those details out, I think it should be fine. All right, so that does it for the questions that were submitted ahead of time, and so what I want to do then is go ahead and talk a little bit about DaVinci Resolve. And so let's switch on over to the Mac here. Okay, so let me tell you about a couple of projects. We're actually going to go take a look from scratch, the video that just went live this morning on the Shure wireless system over on my other channel, Curtis Judd. And also a project that I worked on at work over the last couple of days. And the one at work, let me start with that one. It's kind of a unique one. And this will kind of highlight how these different workflows happen. So we're here in the Fairlight panel, you can see right down here. So with the music notes. And we have what looks like a very railroaded type of edit here. I can't actually play this one for you because it hasn't been released yet. It will be released later this week, but let me just kind of talk through some of the challenges and what this one was. So first of all, this one was interesting from the standpoint that we had a scheduling conflict. We wanted to have one of the co-founders of the company on a live stream, but they couldn't make it to the live stream, just scheduling wise. So it's a two-person thing. There's our host, Aaron, and Sergi is one of the co-founders. And we wanted Sergi to come on and talk about a new feature. So because of that scheduling conflict, what we did is we actually recorded it as if it were a live stream using OBS. And when I went to go edit it, I was like, wow, this is really good. I don't think there's a lot for me to edit here. The sound quality was not awesome on Sergi's side. He just used his MacBook microphone, so it wasn't amazing, but it was good enough for, we had a very quick turnaround. It was more important to get Sergi on than it was to make the perfect sound. So he's completely understandable, but the levels were different between the two. So Aaron has a live stream studio that we set up for him. And if I go back here, you can actually probably see it. All right, so here's Aaron's studio. He's got a nice sound setup. He's using a Shure SM7B and a DBX286S. So his sound is pretty well already kind of processed and ready to go. And you can see that in his in the waveform here for his audio, which is this first track here. Now, Sergi, on the other hand, was using that MacBook speaker or microphone, and it was coming in. We were getting good, strong signal, lots of reverb. Didn't have time to necessarily process all of that, but the biggest problem we had was that perceptually, and even according to the loudness meter, Sergi ended up coming in about 3 dB or 3 LUFS hotter than Aaron, and so that's not a great experience for an audience to hear. So we did a little bit of leveling beforehand, but then, of course, once you start rolling, people start talking at different levels. It's not uncommon. It happens quite a bit, and this is what happened here. So this was actually the program feed. I got everything. It was a single video clip with all the audio baked in, which means I just had a stereo audio track for the entire thing. I didn't have Aaron on one track and Sergi on the other. Everything was just a mix. That was it. And so to address this issue, the way I went about it, you could do it a couple of different ways. You could actually just play through and automate down the portions where Sergi's talking, where it was a little loud. That's one option. Another option is what we did here, and I did the kind of a railroad option. So if I zoom in a little bit here, every time that Sergi talked, I actually made a cut and just moved his audio down to its own track. And that holds true throughout the entire edit here. So you can see Sergi talking, Sergi talking, Aaron, Sergi, so on and so forth. And so I just went through and moved all of those down. And then you'll see here, to get Aaron's level up to Sergi's level, I just used the fader on Aaron's track and I added 4 dB. Then when I measured that with the loudness meter that's built in here to Fairlight, which is really nice, I was able to confirm, okay, yeah, now they're at the same level, and also using, of course, my ears and headphones, got them to the same level. So it's a workable solution. In addition to that, because Sergi was coming in on that MacBook microphone, I wanted to do a little bit of compression, so I was able to add that here as well. And it's fairly mild compression, 2-to-1 ratio, threshold at -9 roughly, very soft knee, attack 2.2 milliseconds, release 127 milliseconds. And so it's pretty mild. It's not doing a lot. It's more kind of just making it a little bit more even and a little easier to listen to. So that's basically what we did here. We also applied a little bit of EQ. Again, his mic was sounding a little bit harsh, so I did a pretty substantive cut here at 1 kilohertz of about 3.5 dB. So that helped kind of mellow it out just a little bit as well. So between those things, that's how we kind of got to this is an example of a very, very quick turnaround where we actually used the program output from the switcher, switching app, in this case, OBS. I cut out all of the Sergi's lines, put them down on a separate track, and then I could process them independent of each other. So that's one workflow. So let's pause there. Let's go out to the chat and see what questions or thoughts people have out in the chat. Johan, I've tried a couple of times to export stems in Fairlight, and it always exports without any track level effects I apply, like compression and EQ. That's interesting. If you go, I guess I'd need to know more, Johan, about your particular workflow and how you're doing the export. If we come, let's go back to the Mac and let me just show you what I would probably do here. So I don't, like if you're doing stems, like you're doing a dialogue stem, a music stem, and an effects stem, then I would assume that you have buses set up for each of those. So for the dialogue, you have all of the dialogue tracks routed to a bus. You have all of the music routed to a bus, and then you have all the effects, the sound effects routed to a bus. And then what I would do is bounce the bus. So actually come up to, let's see, if I go to, I don't have any, well, I have this bus right here. So if I come up here, and I could bounce this to a new track and then just export the track, because that'll create a file. So again, it's really kind of, there are a lot of details here, so I'm not sure exactly how you went about doing it, but that's how I would generally go about doing that. I would bounce each of those buses to a new track, and then I would have that file for each of those tracks. Those would be, in essence, your stems. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Do you know of any mixers besides the Blackmagic one that will work with Fairlight? Asks Bicky Bickford. In theory, anything with the, I believe it's the Mackie-Huey protocol, or Mackie, I may be getting that mixed up. The short answer, I don't know off the top of my head, no. I have the Fairlight mixing, the kind of the desktop console, and that works really, really nicely. That's just literally plug in and it goes. But I have not been successful. I think I did try to set up the Allen and Heath SQ5 to work with Fairlight, and I was not successful doing it, so I don't know the answer to that. But Blackmagic should be able to answer that question for you. Their support is actually quite good, in my experience. Mark says, for Dewey, he should take a look at the approved mixing surfaces for the MixPre, such as the Novation Launch Control XL and others listed in the MixPre operation manual. That's a good point. So Dewey, if you want something that's a little easier to operate instead of having the fader knobs, maybe in an optimal position, maybe not. There are some different control surfaces that are compatible with the MixPre, including the Novation Launch Control XL. So that could potentially make things a little easier for you. And they're fairly affordable. The Novation, I think, was I bought one some years ago. I think it was just over $100. Not too bad. Okay. Mark, I would hate to run a live event on a MixPre. The app on an iPad would be usable in a crunch. That's from Matt. Thanks for that, Matt. Cool. Great flow for problematic dialogue. Yes. When you've got to turn it fast, we had to go very, very fast. So at work, I don't normally get to edit because I am the manager for the group. So the editors were both busy on other projects, and so we needed to turn this very, very quickly. I got like an hour and a half to work on it, so that's what we did. All right, Becky. Good luck. Hope that Blackmagic's able to get you some good info there. All right, that should do it for now. Okay, next one I want to go into with Fairlight is, let's look at how I would do one of my own YouTube videos in DaVinci Resolve and Fairlight. I'm not going to go into the editing stuff as much, but the thing that's interesting about the workflow that we've developed over time as far as my YouTube videos is we've made it very, very simple. And the way we do that is we actually record all of the voiceover, all the talking head at one time. It's literally one file. We're not doing multiple takes. unless something gets really messed up. So usually what that means is I do all my testing and research first. I have an outline. It's never really scripted word for word, but I usually have an outline, the pros and cons listed for if it's a review, a sort of an outline for the steps I want to go through if it's more of a tutorial. And when I'm done with that, then I go do the recording. When I'm done with recording, so we have one video clip, one audio clip. First thing I do is I process the audio clip, and I can take that from start to finish on that, because all we're going to do in post now is I'm going to have some music for maybe, and actually don't even put the music at the start anymore. I'm finding that people have so little patience for watching longer videos that we're trying to make them as short and compact as possible while still keeping the detail. So we've done away with the intro. We just go straight into it. So it's just dialogue. Then at the end, we might put some outro music, and that's already been normalized to -17. So my videos on YouTube are usually mastered to -17 or loudness normalized to -17. Or if it's in a review of an audio product like a microphone, a wireless system, where I don't want to bake in a lot of processing because I want people to be able to hear what it sounds like without a bunch of processing, I feel like that's a little bit more genuine, and it's a better place for people to start from and understand, hey, what does this thing sound like out of the box? So we normally we normalize to -23 LUFS in those cases. And what that means in practical terms is we don't have to do any compression to get to that loudness usually. So that means we can get to that standardized loudness and not have to do any processing to get there. So once I've processed the audio, then I export that. Then I go into DaVinci Resolve. I sync the audio and the video. And then I do my edit, the video edit. And then once the video edit's done, if I need to do any additional touch-up, I can do that in the Fairlight panel. So I understand it's a pretty unusual workflow. Maybe not. That's the way I do it. And the reason we developed that workflow is that was before we were using DaVinci Resolve. We were using Final Cut, and we still are using Final Cut. So Final Cut is actually pretty awful when it comes to mixing. It's great for video editing, but it's pretty awful for actually mixing audio. So for us, if I had to do all of the edit first and then export the audio and then process it and then bring it back in, it was a little clunkier with Final Cut. So that's how we developed that process. Now, if you're doing a piece where you have multiple clips or multiple takes, that's where the more traditional kind of film workflow comes in. And that is where you wouldn't process your audio first. That would be done after the edit and after the video edit. And the reason for that is if you come home with 200 audio clips for 70 takes, you don't want to have to process all that audio just to have the editor throw most of it out. So, and you also don't have it in context in that case either. So if you're switching locations and you have to, part of the mixing challenge at that point, and kind of the art at that point, is making the transition from one scene to the next seem right, sound right. And so that may change the way that you process, for example, an outdoor scene versus an indoor scene. So there's just a lot of considerations. But let's go ahead and take a look over here. So what I'm going to do is let's just go ahead and open up a blank project here, and I'm just going to kind of run you through it. So when I process my audio, here is the clip from the Shure SLX-D wireless microphone system, the video that I posted on my main channel today. This was the whole take here. It was pretty long. It was like 20 minutes long-ish. And we got to cut some of it out, but not a lot of it out. But I don't worry about doing any of that stuff right now. Only thing I'm doing here is if I need to sweeten the audio in any way, I would do that, which I don't really need to. In a studio setting, it's usually pretty good right out of the recorder. Using a Sennheiser MKH50, sound devices MixPre. In this case, we ran the MKH50 through the Shure wireless system to the MixPre, but the wireless system was really good, so it didn't need any sort of really cleanup or anything like that. What we did do, though, however, is you'll notice here a couple of things. Overall, the loudness is at -30, so we're mono. So what that means is I want to get this the finished piece, the finished dual mono audio, I want it to sit at -23. So whenever you go from mono to dual mono, you get, in essence, an automatic 3 dB boost, so in LUFS. So what I want to do here is target -26, but the problem is I don't have enough headroom to just boost it up to -26. It's sitting at -30 right now. So what I'm going to do, here's the clap at the start. This is just my sync clap. I don't need that to be quite so prominent. So I'm going to highlight it and use the gain module, and we're just going to drop it so that it's at a reasonable level. It can still sync now once we get over into Resolve, but it's not sticking out and making problems for me in terms of my overall loudness. So now I can see a little closer what my headroom is here under True Peak once that comes up. It's measuring. It takes a little bit because it has 90. So now I have 4.5 dB of headroom. And that's getting closer. So I want to go from -30 to -26, meaning I need 4 dB of headroom plus another 1.5 dB of headroom, because I always want to keep another at least 1.5, preferably 2 dB of headroom, so that when I export the final video, some of that headroom will get eaten up. That's just part of the compression process, or the video encoding process and the audio encoding process, because that's when we're converting from a lossless format, WAV files, to a lossy format. In most cases, I'm exporting AAC audio along with an H.264 file. So what that means in practical terms is I need 5.5 dB of headroom, and I've only got 4.5 right now. So what do? One thing I notice is I have some asymmetry here. Here's a good example of some asymmetry. This waveform right here, notice how it's sitting at about -5 on this side, and it's sitting at about oh, good grief, it's only like -12 at most, maybe -13 on this side. So that's definitely asymmetric, and that's robbing me of headroom. And that's not the only one. It's throughout it's my voice. It's just a feature of my voice. So fortunately, in RX, we have this phase module, and there's this adaptive phase rotation option. So I'm just going to go ahead and click render. And once it's rendered, you'll notice it will gain a little bit more headroom here under True Peak. So let's see, we're going from -4.5, and it takes a while here. This is an offline operation, by the way. This is not something that can be done in like a real-time plugin. This is something that has to be done offline, the way it's implemented right now, at least. So I've had a lot of people question, hey, how come I don't get the phase module in RX as a plugin in my digital audio workstation like DaVinci Resolve or Fairlight? And the answer is it has to be done online, and it has to be done in the Isotope RX editor, which is what we're in right now. Okay, so now it finished and we now have 6.5 dB of headroom. So what that means in practical terms is I can bump this up to -26. That's great news. So go ahead and bump that up. And that takes a few moments here as well. It's making sure that we're not exceeding any of our targets here. There we go. So now we are sitting at reading. Now we're sitting at -26, and we have 2.5 dB of headroom. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want. Now, you might say, hey, wait, Curtis, I thought you were trying to go to -23. I am. So I'm going to go ahead and convert this to dual mono. So I'm going to select everything, Command A in this case, go up to File, New, and I want to make it stereo. In our case, we're doing a 48 kilohertz sample rate, so I'll click OK. So now it gave me a new stereo file, and I can just Command V to paste. Actually, let me go back here. Did it get it? No. Command A to select all, Command C to copy, and then I come over here to Command V to paste, and now it's dual mono, and you'll notice here as it reads this, the integrated level should now sit at -23. Again, it's that magic of when you convert to dual mono, you get, yeah, here it is, -23, and we still have -2.5 dB of headroom. So that's the target. That's where I want it. So what I can do at this point is go ahead and I can save this, and I'm going to keep it in WAV format. And let's put it here. And this is waveform, and I'm just going to call this sample audio. Okay. Now we're going to come back over into Resolve, and we're going to come over here to our media pool, and we're going to go ahead and bring in our video footage and our audio. So for video, I'm going to go ahead and bring in the main file here. It's asking me to change the project frame rate. The default, I didn't change it yet, so I'm going to go ahead and tell it to change. It's going to match the footage here, which is 23.976 frames per second. And then I'm also going to go back up and get the audio, which I believe I saved here. We call it sample audio. We'll go ahead and bring that down here as well. We can highlight those two, right-click, and we're going to synchronize them here. Sync them together. So the way to do that is auto sync audio based on the waveform. We're not using timecode or anything here, just waveform. So go like that. It's analyzing. See how it does. Hopefully it gets it. I have found that Resolve is not quite as good at Premiere or Final Cut at doing this sync. It usually works, but sometimes it has trouble. So here we go. Okay, it says it's synced. Now it says video plus audio here. Okay, let's go ahead and drop this in a timeline now. And let's head on over to Fairlight and see what we got. It looks like we got nothing. This is the challenge I have with Fairlight over and over again. It doesn't like, oh wait, oh no, there it is. It actually just needed to draw them. Okay, we're good this time. It did better than I expected, so thank you, Fairlight. That does appear also to be the normalized bit, so cool. Okay, so it did bring it in. All good. My apologies, Blackmagic Design, for assuming that you missed, but you actually got it, so good job. Okay, let's see here. Yeah, so there's our whole thing. So what I would normally do, of course, is come into the cut page and I would do all of the editing here. I have a goofy look on my face there. Just do the editing. So here's where I would cut out the parts where I messed up, where I made mistakes, anything like that. So let's just listen to this and make sure it came through okay. Receiver. This is only a single channel receiver. We'll talk about that more in just a little bit. In terms of its ability to transmit. Okay, so there's an example of something that I would cut out. There's a little bit of a pause there, and we just want to keep this moving along here. So what I can do here is, first of all, I don't need the media pool to be so huge. I would open up the waveform some. And what I can do here is, I think I took a breath here. Let's see. By the way, that's one other thing I didn't cover in RX. That normally, once I've normalized, actually, let's just demonstrate that really quickly. Before I export, and before I get to this level here, what I will do often is come in and take care of the breaths. And what I mean by take care of the breaths, there is this debreath or breath control module, or I think it only comes as a module. I don't remember if you can get it as a plugin as well, but I have found this is, I mean, the cool thing about this is it's very quick. There are just a few settings here, and you can say whether you want to use gain or target. You want to get your target level, so maybe you want your breaths to sit down at maybe -45. You tell it how sensitive you want it to be. You have this output breaths only so you can hear. What I have found with this is that my breaths vary enough that it doesn't work reliably. So we actually manually go through and manage the breaths, and it's literally just as simple as coming in, highlighting the breath, and turning the gain down. So I just use the gain module to reduce it some. So let's undo so you can hear before. Here's before, like things like that. I've had, that's before. So it just brings it down. I don't want it to sound unnatural and otherworldly by cutting the breaths out, but I don't want them to be quite so prominent. So that is another step that I usually do that I forgot to tell you about before. So before I export this from Isotope RX, I'll usually do a pass of that as well. Also mouth clicks. I do find that mouth declick works really nicely here. Things are getting a little messy here. But mouth declick, which is right here, let me just demonstrate that. I'm going to go ahead and output the clicks only, just so you can hear what it's picking up and removing. I apologize for that, but that's another thing that I will often do if I'm processing something a little bit more carefully, is I'll do a mouth declick pass. And this actually works pretty nicely to get those sort of saliva noises. What it doesn't always get is the types of clicks. And in those cases, what I'll do, let me see if I can find one of those. I've certainly got some of those in here, although I've been training myself not to do that as much. They will often appear. Let me see if I can find one. I did pretty well. Darn it. Sorry. They will often appear, though they won't be as tall as this, but sort of like a clap, they will be something like that. And that's where I find that the declick plugin does better. You can run this directly from Fairlight, by the way. Both the mouth declick and the declick you can, but you can see here, if I go back, let's go back to our default setting. Widen the click just a bit. Let me see if this actually will get this. Yeah, see what happened to that clap? It went from sounding like this to this. So with mouth clicks, it oftentimes will just completely remove it. So that was a clap. It's not really made for that, but just as a kind of a demonstration. Okay, back off of the sidebar. Oh, Danny, I think says that maybe we need some questions. So let me head back over to Resolve and let's take a break right here and see what questions we have. How are you liking the Fairlight console? Maybe a topic for a future session. I rarely use it, is how I'm liking it. It's a lot of money for something I rarely use. That's gonna be most useful for pieces where you have a lot more going on audio-wise than I have in either of the two videos we've talked about here. Once I get to maybe a two-person interview, I might pull it out. It's more useful in those circumstances, but especially if you start to 3 or 4 people and you don't have an auto mix or anything like that during the recording, that's when the console gets more useful. Those faders then become a lot more useful. So I would say for talking head video, not worth the investment. For my workflow, at least the way I work. If you're going to be doing a lot of 2-person, 3-person, 4-person interviews, that's where I think it becomes a lot more interesting. Or if you're working on short films where you have sound design elements, you have music, you have dialogue from multiple characters within the piece, that's when having all those faders becomes super helpful. So hopefully that makes sense. Mark says, I do interviews. Is there a general Fairlight process to get my audio in a good place? IQ or filters, etc. I have a mix, I assume that's a MixPre 10, and use Sanken COS 11D. I edit in DaVinci Resolve and rather not use another audio program. Yes, we have an entire course on mixing in DaVinci Resolve, and the sample that we use in the course specifically is a 2-person interview. So we walk through that process from start to finish, several hours of training. That would probably be the best way to go about that. That's my shameless plug, but yeah, that's probably the best. And I just going back to the first example I gave you, where we did have a 2-person one. If you already have them broken out onto 2 tracks, that's the main idea. Is you want to have each person on their own track with their own microphone in as much as possible. You railroad, in other words, when somebody's not talking, you just cut that portion out altogether. You either cut it or you can use a fader to fade it back until the other person is talking again, and then you fade them back until that person is talking again, and you fade them back up so you can hear them again. So the idea is you're cleaning up the mix by removing the extra microphone that's not currently being used, and you go back and forth. So this person's talking, the faders forward, this person's talking, their faders forward, and the other person's faders down, so on and so forth. So you can do that with automation, or you can do that with railroading, and we cover all of that in the course as well. And actually we've covered that, I think, in some of the other live streams we've done here. And like I showed you before, we had railroaded that first example I showed just a few minutes ago. So that's another way to do it. Okay. Why dual mono? Fairlight can easily handle mono files. Yeah, actually that's probably a vestige of using Final Cut. There was a time when Final Cut didn't handle mono files very well. You're right, I could probably just leave it mono in Fairlight. It'd be fine. I can barely handle iMovie. So much to learn. Yes, but I think I need a personal class with Mr. Judd. I'll bring the tacos. Deal. It's a deal, Audio Buff. But I'd also like, and actually I'll bring the tacos as well, and you can teach me how to mix a 74-piece orchestra and choir. How about that?
Okay, and then Linda has a very good point about how do you keep up with learning with. This is about iMovie.
Okay, this is cool. Yeah, so Linda brings up a great point. I open it once a year to make sure I remember how it works. The same is true with Final Cut Pro. I completely agree. If you want to keep that muscle memory, you got to open it every once in a while. So I'm spending a little bit more time in Resolve and Fairlight nowadays, which is good. It's helping to build that a little bit, building those muscles, as they say. I completely agree, Linda. Oh, that smack sound. Ugh, sorry. I know you did sync by audio, but I've had a problem with RX nuking metadata timecode when I export a cleaned up recording. Any experience with that? No, because usually, Christopher, when I'm using timecode, I'm not processing the audio first. And by the time I get into RX, I've already done the sync in Resolve. So I haven't run into that as an issue based on my workflow. But if you do try to go into RX first before you do the timecode sync, then yeah, I don't know. That's a problem I haven't solved yet because I haven't run into it yet. Mark, I am seeing an ASMR channel opportunity for you with the output clicks only option. Oh, Mark, that would be torture. That would be the torture channel, the audio ASMR torture channel. Let's not do that. Christopher, given your comment on auto mixing during recording, any experience with plugin, etc. based post auto mixers? There is one called WT Auto Mixer. I wasn't super impressed with its results, but there is a new version that I haven't tried yet. So that might be something worth looking at. We have actually used production field recorders, namely the Sound Devices 833. Output a mix that we were working on in post, put it through the Dugan Auto Mixer on the 833 and recorded it again to address it. So that's one thing we've done. So if you do have a field recorder, whether it be a Sound Devices 8 series, a MixPre with MixAssist, or any other device out there like that you have enough channels, you can actually run it out that way. There's a little bit of work getting it routed all correctly, but that's another option as well. So not a software-based solution, but that is another option as well. That's kind of the hybrid. A lot of people that do kind of a hybrid mixing workflow where they have some analog gear will do things like that. They'll actually run the audio out into analog gear, have it process, and then bring it back in to their digital audio workstation. So that's another option. Rich, sorry, not related to audio cleanup, but do you have a recommendation for an inside dialogue mic to match the DPA 6060 and 2017? Well, the idea, certainly DPA seems to work this way, is that they voice most of their microphones so that they're close enough that you can get them to match pretty seamlessly in post. So I would stay with DPA if you could. I have a 4160, and it cuts pretty nicely with the 4017B. So, and the 4017B and the 2017 sound pretty similar as well. You know, again, it's a DPA. All the DPAs are voiced fairly similarly. So if you keep it in the family, so to speak, I think you'll be in a good spot to EQ them in post to get them pretty seamless. Okay, removing all the breaths from a long passage, 10-minute plus, becomes fatiguing to listen to. At 30 minutes plus, it becomes exhausting. This is what I experience. I agree. I completely agree. It's not an easy job. The question is it worth it for your production? And that's a question only you can answer. So sometimes you may need to take a break and come back to it. Currently, Emma does all of that processing for us. I used to do it before Emma did, and every once in a while I still do. But yeah, it's tedious, no question about it. if you can get breath control to work reliably, that'd be great. Curtis Judd audio training courses are great. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. I'm coming with my tacos. Yep, let's bring the tacos and let's do some training. That's like the perfect combination.
You can pass this on to Teachable.
Although I do wish Teachable had a better iPad app. I agree. I will say this. So my courses are hosted on Teachable. Here's the trick. The Apple App Store has very strict guidelines about apps that sell services, but they don't sell the services through the App Store. And that's where it becomes complicated for Teachable, is that basically Apple has said, if a creator sold a course and it wasn't through our app, then they can't have access to it via the app in the App Store, is basically my understanding. So that's why I think that's an unresolved issue as far as I'm aware. So that is the unfortunate thing. So you're basically tied to basically a computer. I'm sorry. I hope we can find a solution at some point.
We have some mixing comments, but they're not directed to you.
Okay, we have mixing comments, but they're not directed to me. I mix with my template, 700 channels. That's a big template. Are you working on feature films, Daniela? That sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds like a lot of channels too. I've done short films that had certainly tens of channels. I think the one that had the most channels that I've worked on was probably about 120 channels. It was I mixed one scene of a feature film. No, well, I've also mixed another feature film. I don't know if either of them ever hit the light of day. They were very, independent films. Anyway, yeah, 700 is a lot. Wow.
Okay, we have a
That's a lot of sound design, I bet. Are Teachable courses same as light and sound courses? So what we mean by that is the school.learnlightandsound.com, my courses are hosted on a platform called Teachable. So yes, in this context, they are the same thing.
Daniel says, I think it's classical music.
Oh, classical music. Very good. Oh, that is cool. Love to hear one of your mixes, Daniela. All right, Christopher says, I have a Dugan Model N, which does 64 channels via Dante, but that would require a bounce in real time, which can take a while. Yes, it can take a while indeed. It's not the best solution, but it is a possibility. Max IT, I've used ISO MixPre 6.2 WAV files back through the MixPre via USB from Logic to post Automix OK, but adds a bit of latency. Yeah. So what we did is since we were doing video, and I presume you are as well, Max, but yeah, then you have to sync it afterwards. We actually just recorded it to the 833 and then brought that file in and did the sync there. So yes, while there is some latency, we essentially work around the latency issue by resyncing that saved file. So, but if you're doing it in real time, yes, there is definitely some latency.
We have some interesting commentary about breaths in audio. We have two.
Breaths. Let's talk about breaths. Regarding listening fatigue, I was talking about listening, not editing. Oh, okay. Yes.
Okay, and here's another one related to that.
It makes total no sense to take off the breath. It makes your audio unnatural. Human breath is normal. Maybe it's a funeral video. I couldn't agree more, Daniela. It does not sound right. When I hear those things where it's obvious that they've cut out all the breaths, it's like, why did you do that? Why did you go to all that trouble? How about just a natural sounding piece? People breathe.
Okay.
Just don't make them like that.
How many taco comments do you want?
Danny asks how many taco comments I want. I don't have any tacos today. We're not having tacos for dinner. So
okay, we're going to cut to an actual question.
Back in Fairlight, can you go over the meter options, top right? Absolutely. I think that's a great place. Let's cut back over to the Mac and let's take a look at that. So over here at the top, and let me see if I can make this a little bigger. I don't think we need this actually. So we can Okay, in any case, so here we have our loudness meter. The first thing up here at the top is which loudness standard you want to use. So for those in Europe, going to broadcast, you'd probably want to use EBU R128. In the United States, we're often just using these BS.1770. And it defaults to the BS 1770-1, which is the original. The -4 is an update to that. It changes the way, my understanding is it changes some of the particulars of the algorithm. Again, this is designed specifically for broadcast, but you can also use it for if you're just putting a video on the internet somewhere. It's still useful in those cases. So that's typically what I'm going to use here is the BS 1770-4. You'll notice there are some specific services, like here's Netflix, here's YouTube, Disney, Disney 5.1. I don't know the particulars of these here. Even though I'm sending my video to YouTube, I don't usually use that. But let me just talk about where you do it. So you have this integrated number here. And let me go ahead and just play back a little bit. We're going to reset and we're going to start our loudness meter. And here we go. At distance, outdoors, we found that we got our first dropout at about 50 meters. And even just after a little bit, we're already hitting -23. But you'll notice it's yellow right now. And that's because I have not set the target yet in this project. And the way to do that is come up to File, go down to Project Settings, and then over here, we're going to come to Fairlight. And here in Fairlight, we can set our target loudness level. Here it's at -23. So actually, it's right exactly where I want it for this particular piece. If I were going to YouTube and I was doing a video where I was not demonstrating or reviewing a piece of a microphone or a mixer, something where I did want to process it. If I'm making a video, for example, about being a shill, where I want to kind of have the loudness so it competes better with a lot of the other videos around it, I would actually change this to -17 right here. Just like that. Or if it's highlighted, you can just type it in. So -23. So once you've done that, you can save. Let's play a little bit more of it. That wasn't a very long section. So let's play a little bit more and see where we get. In terms of transmission distance, when we went outdoors with nothing nearby out in the wild of the mountains of Utah, we got our first dropout at 50 meters when the pack was not in line of sight. When it was in line of sight, we got to around 70 meters, but when it's out of line of sight, which is, for example, placing it on your back on the belt when you're facing the camera, we got 50 meters, which is excellent. Compared to a lot of the other digital systems that we've used so far, that's actually one of the better ones. So that works really well. Indoor. Okay, so so when it's pretty much where it needs to be, it's going to turn yellow. When it's not, it's going to turn red. We've also have some other things that go along with this standard here. So we have a short-term loudness, a short-term max loudness. It's not meeting all of those, but for YouTube, it doesn't necessarily matter. The short-term max is not as critical. What we do care about, though, is our true peak over here, which is currently showing as -4.2, which is great. That's plenty of headroom. Ideally, what you're going to want to do is at the very end, you're going to want to do a loudness pass on the entire piece. So once you've finished all of the edit, you've finished all of the mixing, and you want to run it through, and you can go get a beverage of your choice or a little snack or take a walk or whatever it is that you want to do while you let it run through. You'll first reset, choose start, go back to the very start of your piece, and then hit play, and you can walk away and go do whatever you need to do. Come back, and then you should get your integrated loudness and your true peak. Those will be the two most important things. Of course, before you do that, make sure you reset and start the loudness meter. So you're telling it to kind of, okay, start from scratch. Don't add to what we've already been playing back. Just start over and play through the entire piece. So that's how you get your overall integrated loudness. You'll notice part of the reason I do that in RX is that it's a lot easier to do that because it's an offline operation here. That is to say, I can go ahead and do, let's say I'm going to run a plugin here. Let's just do some compression. And I don't need the de-esser. Let's turn on the compressor. Come over here. Let's say I wanted to manage the, even things out a little bit here. Let me just play this through. Now, Shure is one of the most experienced wireless microphone companies in the world. They're coming up on 99 years. Well, they're at 99 years this year, 100 years next year. They actually started working with wireless of a variety of sorts way back in the I think in the 19 teens. There's a whole story there. We'll come back to that. But the SLX-D represents, see how it does over here. Let's talk through the pros and cons. I've taken the entire summary. Okay, so this might be a little bit too extreme, but let's just, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and render out these settings. So I'm going to render the compression, and you'll notice that watch the peaks here. The amplitude will come down on some of those peaks here. So this is cool. Okay, it ran all that. Now the loudness is processing again. It's measuring it right now. It does it faster than real time, which is beautiful, saves you time. And it is almost done. This is, again, it's a 20-minute piece. Now we're at we have a minus 5.4 true peak headroom, which is different than before, and minus 23.2. So we gained almost an additional dB of headroom, and we're not quite as loud. It dropped by 0.2 LUFS, not a big deal, but in any case, that's why I often like to do this work in RX when I can, because it can be done offline. If I'm over here in RX, if I want to get that loudness, I have to run through the whole thing. In Fairlight. If I want to get the loudness in Fairlight, I have to run through the whole thing. I think I can speed it up. There comes a point where it won't measure if you go too fast, but if you can speed up the playback, that'll help a little bit. But that's the idea with those meters over there. So again, let's just play through, maybe starting right here, get a couple seconds. Just out of the frame here with the SLX-D3 plug-on transmitter. That's what you're hearing. We'll also play back some samples that include their SLX-D1 body pack transmitter along with the Uniplex lavalier microphone. So let's roll those samples. Let's talk through the pros and cons. I've taken the entire summary in written form and put it at the end of the video if you want to go straight to that. Okay, so that's where we're at right now. So again, true peak here is sitting at minus 2.6. So that's kind of the general workflow. So I will come in here and I can actually, if these are all cut up into individual clips during my edit, I can apply an effect to a specific clip if I want to, or I can apply it to the track over here if I prefer to do that. So I've got both options. If I want something to apply to everything in the track, of course, I can put it over here in the effects and just click on plus and then add whatever effect I need here. However, if I just want to apply it to an individual clip over here, I can do that as well. And I just bring up my effects panel here. And let's say I might want to drop one of these. I could just drop one of these, maybe a de-esser. I can just put it on here. This one I actually don't own, or I do, but I haven't entered the license. So we're going to go ahead and close that. So that's how that works. Now, there was a question that came up earlier. There is a loudness audio normalization feature over here. And if I click this, so say I'm going to export this here, I can choose a variety of different things here, and I can choose, for example, YouTube. Let's say I'm going to upload my video to YouTube. Well, here's what it suggests as the targets. It wants the target dB true peak level to be -1, and it wants the overall LKFS, which incidentally is just another name, for all practical purposes, another name for LUFS. LUFS is loudness units full scale. LKFS is loudness units K-weighted relative to full scale. So you can use them as the same thing, but you can see here it is targeting -14. Here's my perspective on that. YouTube set that as their target loudness because they put a ton of music. There are tons and tons of popular music videos on YouTube. And for music, that target makes sense. For primarily spoken word pieces, I feel like that's a little too compressed. That's a personal opinion. That's why I usually target around -17. If you play a video that is normalized at -14 and then you play another one at -17, you'll be able to hear a little bit of a difference, but not that much. So it's actually pretty close. So from my point of view, it's worth leaving that additional headroom personally. The way YouTube works is if you master something, or if you loudness normalize something louder than -14, it's just going to pull it down to -14. If you have something that's not mastered that loud, that's not normalized to -14, it's just going to leave it alone. It's not going to do anything to it. As of right now, at least, is how it seems to work. So the question that came up earlier was, hey, this seems like a weird place to put this, and how does it work? Well, let's do this. Let's actually render out just the audio in this case. You could normally do it with...
minutes for questions. We're almost out of time.
Okay, I'm just going to render this really quickly. Put this on the desktop. We're going to call it untitled MOV. That's fine. And we're going to render that. While that's rendering, let's get back over to some questions. Let's go back to the main camera. Okay, we have just a few minutes. What is Fairlight better for than Cubase or Digital Performer for video? Absolutely better for video. Is the MixAssist plugin worth it for the MixPre 10, or Fairlight's voice ISO is good enough? Depends on what you're doing. If you're doing a lot of interviews, podcasts, that type of thing, I think that MixAssist is definitely worth it. The voice isolation is a different thing. It's not doing the same thing that MixAssist is doing. MixAssist is actually essentially pulling down the faders for the people who are not currently talking and putting that into the mix track. You can still get the isolated channels, but it's just giving you a much cleaner mix to start with. And oftentimes for podcasts or interviews or things like that, you're not going to have to do any additional mixing. You can just use that Automix mix track and you should be fine. Voice ISO is more about cleaning up noise. And it works pretty nicely, but it's not always great when you have multiple people talking, each with their own microphone. That's my perspective. Okay. Let's come back over here. I think we got everything. We'll come back over to the Mac here real quick, Danny. I'm going to drop this untitled in here, which is what we just did. Okay, let's put the untitled into its own thing. Put it over here. I'm going to go over into Fairlight. It's going to render those waveforms. Take it a moment here. So here is the original, and here is the new one. And let's go back and see if there are any other questions while it's rendering that out. Is there a way to save EQ edits similar to LUTs to use as a starting point for dialogue editing? Would you recommend using that? Yes, there is a way to do that. So if we come back over here to the Mac, let's see here. We can do that a couple of ways. So this got crushed. Let's open this back up. There we go. So if I come in here to EQ, open that up, and let's say I wanted to have a kind of a starting point. If you're like recording the same person over and over and over again, absolutely a preset can be really useful. So what you can do is come down here. I think you click plus, and it asks if you'd like to create a new preset. You can say create new. And this is going to see, we'll call this my default CJ EQ. Click OK. Now when you come into your next project, what you'll have is you'll have a default CJ EQ option here in this dropdown, and you should be good to go. So that's cool. Oh, friends, for reasons I cannot explain, it is not rendering those waveforms. Maybe nothing is actually there. Let's play. See what we get. Okay, something went wrong there. Here's the short version for the question that came up earlier. I would not recommend using this. The reason why is that it's not giving you any options about how to compress the audio before it gets normalized to this loudness target. So my guess is it's just going to hard limit, and you can still get distortion if it's doing some pretty extreme hard limiting. So I would not normally recommend using that. Premiere has something like that as well, and at work we tried using it and it's just hard limiting. It just doesn't sound great. So not recommended from my point of view. I'll look into this a little bit more here and see if that's what this one's doing as well, but that's my suspicion. So all it's doing is it's literally boosting the levels, and anything that's in this case, that approaches -1 dB true peak. It's just chopping it off. Boom. Not a great sound.
Daniela, she does footsteps in Foley.
Oh, you do footsteps in Foley as well. Very good.
So it's not classical music.
Not classical music. Okay, footsteps in Foley. That's very cool. All right. I believe we are at time, friends. It's time to wrap up on that one. Again, if you're interested in joining us on the other live streams that are happening today with light and sound of various sorts, Matt Ruffs is up next. Check out the link below that'll take you to his website, and then you can sign up. I think he's setting up a Facebook group as well, and then also a link out to his YouTube channel. So with that, get out there and make some great sound. We'll talk to you again next week. Take care, everybody.